I still remember that evening so clearly, the kind of night that stays with you, not because anything dramatic happened, but because something quietly shifted inside me. Forever, the house was unusually still. My son David was out with his friends, and I was left alone with my thoughts and the faint hum of the city outside. I was sitting on the couch, tired after a long day at work, flipping through channels with no real interest, when I heard a soft knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. It was late. Curious, I opened it, and there stood Jamie, David's best friend, Jack, a kid I had watched grow up beside David since they were little, always cheerful, always full of life. But that night, something about him was different. He looked vulnerable, almost fragile, like the weight of the world was pressing down on him. His eyes avoided mine as he whispered, "Hey, can I stay here for a while?" I didn't want to go back. Without thinking, I stepped aside and let him in. The air between us felt heavy, like a secret waiting to be told. Jack wasn't just a kid anymore. He carried something inside him, a tension I couldn't ignore. As he settled in, I noticed how his usual confidence was replaced by nervous energy. He was fidgeting with the sleeves of his hoodie, eyes darting around like he was searching for an escape, or maybe just a place to belong. "Want some coffee?" I asked, my voice softer than usual. He nodded silently. We sat together in the living room, the glow of the lamp casting long shadows. For a long while there was just silence, comfortable but charged. I found myself watching him more closely than I should have, the way his jaw tightened when he was deep in thought, the way his hands trembled slightly. I thought about how much David meant to me, my pride and joy, and how Jack, his best friend, was suddenly here, stirring something in me that I hadn't felt in years. It was confusing, unsettling, and strangely comforting all at once. "Thanks for letting me stay," Jack finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Any time," I replied, not really knowing what else to say. The hours slipped by as we talked about everything, their school, dreams, fears, but there was always something unsaid between us, a silent current pulling us closer. I could feel it in every glance, every breath that lingered too long. That night, nothing was resolved, and yet everything had changed. Jack was no longer just David's best friend. Somehow he had become so much more, and I knew deep down that this was just the beginning of a story I never expected to live. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds, painting soft stripes across the living room floor. Jack was still there, sitting quietly on the couch, scrolling through his phone like he wasn't holding the weight of last night on his shoulders. I brewed fresh coffee and sat down across from him. For a moment we just looked at each other, two people tangled in something neither had planned. "Did you sleep at all?" I asked, breaking the silence. Jack shrugged, his usual easy smile replaced with something hesitant. "Not really, couldn't stop thinking." I nodded, understanding more than I let on. The truth was, I couldn't stop thinking either, about him, about what was happening between Us, over the weeks that followed, Jack started coming over more often. It wasn't just because David invited him. Anymore, it felt different, like he was searching for something, a safe place. Maybe, or maybe something more. We'd sit in the kitchen late at night, talking quietly about life and dreams. Jack had this way of looking at me that made my chest tighten, like he was trying to see past all the walls I'd built around myself. One evening he caught me off guard. Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's story, like you're stuck somewhere you don't belong? His words hit me harder than I expected. I thought about the years of pretending, hiding parts of myself to keep everything normal for David. Yeah, I said finally, more than you. No, he nodded, a flicker of something vulnerable passing through his eyes. That night, the space between us felt smaller. The distance I'd always kept began to crumble. I realized then maybe this wasn't just about David's friend anymore. Maybe it was about two broken souls finding a way to heal in each other. But as much as I wanted to believe it was simple, I knew it wouldn't be. There were boundaries, fears, and consequences looming over every choice we made. Still, for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. Days turned into weeks, and Jack's visits became a quiet routine we both silently craved. There was a comfort in the familiarity, two people sharing space, secrets and unspoken feelings without the pressure of numbing them. One rainy afternoon, David had gone to his soccer practice, leaving Jack and me alone in the house. The soft patter of rain against the windows set a calm mood, but inside, something was shifting. Jack was sitting close on the couch, nervously twisting the hem of his shirt. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I reached out lightly, brushing his hand. It was a small gesture, but the electricity it sparked was undeniable. He looked up, eyes wide and searching. I'm scared, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Me too, I confessed, but sometimes fear is the only thing that means it's real. We sat there in silence, the space between us filled with everything we weren't saying. That night, as I lay awake in bed, I thought about how fragile this all was, how one wrong step could break what little we had. Yet I couldn't deny the growing warmth in my chest, the hope that maybe, just maybe, there was something worth risking. The next few evenings blurred into a rhythm I never expected to crave. Jack would drop by even when David wasn't home, and we'd sit on the back porch together, sipping coffee or just listening to the night sounds. He always stayed longer than he said he would, and I never asked him to leave. One night, as the stars stretched across the sky, Jack leaned his head back and sighed. I hate how quiet my house feels, he said. It's like no one sees me there. I turned toward him. I see you, I said softly, almost surprising myself. He blinked, his face tightening for a second before relaxing again. You always say the right things, he whispered. I didn't. I was scared most of the time, scared of what I was feeling, scared of what it meant. But I meant that. I saw him. I saw all of him. There was a moment so quiet I almost missed it when his knee touched mine. And he didn't move away, neither did I. We sat like that, the soft pressure of skin on skin speaking louder than any words ever could. I could feel his breath slow. Beside me, his shoulder brushed mine, casually at first, then stayed there, resting like it belonged. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. There are moments that don't ask for permission, they just happen, because they were always meant to. That night we didn't cross any lines, but something sacred passed between us. Something real. I didn't sleep much after he left. I lay in bed thinking about the way he looked at me before walking out the door, like he wanted to say something, but couldn't, or maybe he already had, without using any words at all. And me, I was already falling. David had gone away for the weekend to visit his mom in another state, leaving the house unusually quiet. I didn't expect Jack to stop by that evening, but just after sunset, I heard the familiar soft knock. He stood there, rain dripping from his hoodie, hair damp, cheeks flushed. He didn't even say hi. He just looked at me with that same vulnerable expression he'd worn the first night he came over. I didn't want to be alone tonight, he said. I didn't ask why, I just let him in. We ended up in the kitchen, both barefoot on the cold tile floor, talking while the kettle steamed. It felt natural, domestic, even as if we'd done this 100 times before, as if we belonged in the same space. Sometimes, Jack said, staring at the floor, I feel like I'm living in a glass room. Everyone sees me, but no one really sees me. His voice trembled a little, but he didn't cry. He didn't need to. I could feel the pain in every word. I see you, I said again, and this time I meant it even more. Jack looked up slowly. His eyes lingered on mine, searching, daring me not to look away, and I didn't. He stepped a little closer, heart in his throat. I could almost hear it beating between us. My pulse was racing too, not from fear, but from recognition, from the ache of finally being seen and understood. I don't know what this is, he whispered. Neither do I said, but it feels real. He smiled, that soft, sad kind of smile that says me too. Then, slowly he reached out, not boldly, but like someone asking a question. His fingers brushed mine on the kitchen counter, just a touch, barely there, but it sent a shock through me so intense it made my breath catch. We stood there, hand brushing hand, eyes locked, everything else fading. The world went quiet. All I could feel was him. I didn't move away. Neither did he. We stood there in that fragile moment between friendship and something more, balancing on the edge of a line we both knew we were close to crossing, but we didn't rush, because sometimes the space between two people, the waiting, the not yet, is where the truth lives. And in that silence I knew this was no longer just a passing connection. This was something we couldn't name, but couldn't deny either. That night Jack didn't go home. He didn't say he would stay. I didn't ask him to. It just happened, like we both silently understood we needed the company, the safety of being near someone who truly saw us. We sat together on the couch, the television on but long. Forgotten, his shoulder leaned gently into mine. My arm rested behind him, not touching at first, just close, close. Enough that I could feel his warmth I used to think I'd never feel. Safe with anyone, Jack said, voice low, almost like he was afraid to hear it out loud, like I'd always have to hide this part of me. My throat tightened. He wasn't just talking about being seen, he was talking about being accepted, about that part of us we'd both buried for years, too afraid of what it meant, too afraid of what the world would say. You don't have to hide here, I said softly. Not with me. He turned his face slightly, just enough for our eyes to meet. His expression cracked open, something fragile and real shining through. Gratitude maybe, or relief. Then he leaned his head gently against my chest, slowly, like he was testing if the ground beneath him would hold. It did. My arms wrapped around him without hesitation, natural, needed. He let out a breath I didn't know he'd been holding, like someone finally allowed to exhale after years of pretending they were fine. I felt his heartbeat steady and fast beneath my hand, and I realized mine was matching it. We didn't speak for a long time. There was no need. That embrace, quiet, close, safe, was the first time I let him in completely, and even though nothing more happened, something had, because when you've been aching for closeness for so long, even a single moment of being held, of being known, can change everything. That night I stayed awake, with Jack asleep in my arms, and for the first time in years I wasn't lonely. Morning light crept across the living room floor, casting golden lines over the tangled blanket we shared. Jack stirred slightly, his face tucked against my chest like he belonged there. And in that moment, I felt it fully, completely. This wasn't confusion, it wasn't a phase, it was love. I didn't know when it had started or how it had grown in the quiet spaces between us. But it was real, undeniable, and deeper than anything I'd allowed myself to feel in years. When Jack woke, his eyes met mine in the soft glow of morning, and I saw something there I hadn't dared hope for. He didn't move away, didn't speak at first, just held my gaze like he needed to be sure I was still there, that this wasn't a dream. I didn't mean for this to happen. He whispered, I know. I said, me neither. Silence. Then he sat up, rubbing the back of his neck, suddenly nervous. But I don't regret it, he said, voice cracking slightly. Last night, it's the first time I felt like I could just be me, like I wasn't weird or broken. My heart ached at that because I knew exactly what he meant. You're not broken, Jamie, I said gently. You're just brave enough to want something real. His eyes welled and he shook his head like he didn't believe it. But this, he paused, it's complicated. You're David's dad. He stopped himself. It's wrong, isn't it? I exhaled slowly. I don't think love is ever wrong, but it is complicated. He looked at me, searching. So what do we do? I leaned forward, resting my hand over his. We be honest with each other, with ourselves. He squeezed my hand tight, like he didn't want to let go. I'm scared, he admitted. Me too, I said. But I'd rather be scared and real than safe and numb. Jack nodded slowly and then, with all the fear still clinging to his voice, he whispered the words I never thought I'd hear. I think I love you. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rehearsed. It was raw, quiet, terrified, but it was true, and I felt something inside me soften, some old wound I'd buried long ago, finally starting to heal. I placed my forehead against his. You don't have to say it perfectly, I whispered. You already did. In that still silent space, the truth between us finally breathed. No more pretending, no more almost, just us. After that morning, nothing was ever the same again, but somehow everything felt right. Jack didn't stop coming around. But now it wasn't just about casual visits or stolen glances. We carved out time just for each other, quiet walks at dusk, long talks on the porch after David went to sleep, little things, honest things. It wasn't about rushing into anything. We were careful, respectful. This, whatever it was, mattered too much to ruin with haste, but slowly, day by day, love wove itself into everything. He'd leave his book scattered across my table. I'd make his coffee just the way he liked it, too sweet. He'd hum when he folded laundry. Off-key but charming. I started looking forward to those sounds, too. Him, David, didn't notice much at first. But one evening, he joked as he headed out with friends, you two spend more time together than I do with either of you. Jack and I looked at each other. The room went quiet. That was the moment we knew we'd have to face it, to be honest, not just with ourselves, but with the world around us. It was terrifying, but also freeing. One night, under the soft flicker of the backyard lights, Jack turned to me with a quiet smile. If this were just a story, he said, this is where they'd fade to black. I chuckled. Good thing it's not just a story. He stepped closer, then kissed me. I paused. The air between us shimmered with hesitation, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was something closer to wonder, awe. And then I did. I kissed him, not like in the movies, not dramatic or desperate, just soft, real. The kind of kiss that says, I see you. I choose you. I'm not afraid anymore. We stood like that under the stars, two people who'd come from very different worlds, connected by something neither of us expected, but neither of us could ever walk away from. In time, David found out it wasn't easy. There were questions, awkward conversations, silence, but eventually acceptance, because he saw what we had. He saw that it wasn't a fling or confusion. It was love, maybe unconventional, maybe unexpected, but real. And now, years later, when I sit beside Jack on the porch, our fingers intertwined, I sometimes think back to that first night he knocked on my door. How innocent it all seemed, how impossible it all felt, and how somehow, against every odd, it became the most important thing that ever happened to me. He was just my son's friend until that night, until he became the man who showed me I could feel again, the man who taught me that love, real love, doesn't always knock when you're ready. Sometimes it knocks when you're lonely, and it walks in wearing a hoodie with eyes full of fear and a heart full of hope. He was just my son's friend. But loving him became the most honest thing I've ever seen. Thanks for watching.